innocent man released from prison after 37 years for crime he didn't commit. Robert Duboise, man wrongfully convicted of murder and attempted rape of Barbara Grams, Tampa, Florida in 1983. 20 years old Barbara Grams, who was assistant manager at the Hot Potato restaurant in the now defunct Tampa Bay Center, was walking home on August 18, 1983. She slain as she walked home from work, found bludgeoned in the parking lot of a dental office 10 blocks from her house. She had been beaten with a piece of a 2x4. Barbara Grams walked the 2 miles to and from work for the exercise. As she was always worried about her weight, Grams made it within blocks of home before she was slain. A month earlier, freelance photographer Linda Toni Lanson left her apartment the evening of July 10, 1983, about 5 weeks before Grams was slain, and never returned. Her body was discovered the next morning in a ditch in the town and country area of Hillsborough County. Lanson had been raped and shot multiple times. At the time, police officials discounted fears that the killings were related. While Lanson's case has remained cold for nearly 4 decades, it took about 2 months for Hillsborough County authorities to arrest a suspect in Grams' murder. Robert Earl Duboise, 18 years old, was arrested October 22, 1983, and charged in the brutal killing. Duboise was convicted in 1985 of capital murder and attempted sexual battery based upon faulty bite mark evidence and the word of a jailhouse informant. The bite mark expert who testified against him, Dr. Robert Duboise, was also instrumental in securing the capital murder conviction that put serial killer Ted Bundy on Florida's death row. Bundy, who was executed in 1989 for the 1978 murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, also left bite marks on at least one of his victims. Like Bundy, Duboise ended up on death row after the judge in his case overruled jurors' recommendation that he serve life in prison. His death sentence was later commuted to life in prison without parole. The Innocence Project took on Duboise's case in 2018. He was exonerated in 2020 after testing of the DNA evidence in the case proved 2 other men, and not Duboise, were responsible for Grams' murder. The wrong convection. Court records in the case did not indicate how Duboise arrived on detectives' radar, but authorities believed that he, his brother, Victor Duboise, and a friend, Raymond Garcia, had raped and killed Grams. Victor Duboise and Garcia were never charged in the case. On October 13, 1983, authorities obtained an impression of Robert Duboise's teeth for comparison to a supposed bite mark on Grams' body. Duboise, a forensic dentist and assistant Dade County medical examiner, told the newspaper that he had compared the bite mark to 4 or 5 dental impressions given to him by the police. He identified Duboise as the source of the bite mark. Duboise was arrested the same morning that Oriana was slain. In 4 hours of testimony at Duboise's March 1985 trial, Duboise testified that the defendant's teeth, both upper and lower, left the bite mark on the left cheek of Barbara Grams. To a reasonable degree of dental certainty, the bite mark evidence was the only physical evidence that purportedly put Duboise at the scene of Grams' murder, the Innocence Project's lawyers said. No eyewitnesses put him near the crime scene and other physical evidence excluded him as the killer. A jailhouse informant was the only other evidence bolstering the state's case. The jailhouse informant testified that Duboise told him 2 other men had murdered the victim while Duboise raped her. The Innocence Project discovered significant inconsistencies in his original testimony. The new DNA evidence now clearly refutes the informant's testimony. The DNA does not match any of the 3 men that the informant said were involved in the rape and murder. During his testimony, the man denied receiving any benefit for his testimony and denied being a police informant. Both of those claims were later proven false. The informant was facing multiple life sentences for kidnapping, armed robbery and battery of a law enforcement officer. After cooperating with law enforcement and providing a sworn statement in Duboise's case, he was offered a plea and sentenced to 5 years in prison. After testifying in court against Duboise, and once a death sentence was secured, the informant received a further sentence reduction to time served and he was immediately released. Jurors had been told the informant was in prison and would remain there to serve his entire sentence. They also learned that the man had previously provided information on other murders and rapes in the Tampa Bay area and that one of the detectives on the Grams case was the informant's handler. The Innocence Project worked with the state's attorney's conviction review unit, established by Warren in 2018, to go over the scant evidence Duboise's case. Forensic DNA testing was not advanced enough in 1983 for use in prosecution, so rape kit samples recovered from the victim were collected and stored away, Warren's office said in 2020. Evidence stored from Duboise's trial was presumed to have been destroyed in 1990, making new DNA testing seemingly impossible. In August 2020, prosecutors discovered the evidence they believed had been lost. Rape kit samples from Duboise's trial were presumed to have been destroyed in 1990, making new DNA testing seemingly impossible. However, in August 2020, in the course of her case review, CRU supervising attorney Teresa Hall located rape kit samples unused in the trial, still intact, at the Hillsborough Medical Examiner's office. DNA lab tested them. When the DNA from the crime scene was compared to that of Duboise, there was no match. The bite mark evidence was also problematic. The scientific community now considers bite mark evidence unreliable in identifying perpetrators in criminal cases such as this, and a current expert has determined the injury was not, in fact, a bite mark at all, Warren's office stated. The court initially modified Duboise's sentence in August 2020 to the time he had already served for the murder, allowing him to be immediately released. In September 2020, he was officially exonerated. Robert has spent more than 36 years in prison because of discredited bite mark evidence and the testimony of an unreliable jailhouse informant. The presence of DNA from 2 other people is indisputable scientific proof that he is innocent. Robert has spent decades determined to show that he was wrongfully convicted, and we are eager to see him fully exonerated. Robert Duboise stepped out of Hardy Correctional Institution as a free man for the first time on September 2020. When asked what he wanted to do first, he answered, "Well, I already did it. I hugged my mom." Duboise said he always knew the DNA evidence would clear his name. He expressed hope that his story would encourage other wrongfully imprisoned people to continue to fight for their freedom. When asked if he was bitter about the wrongful conviction which resulted in spending nearly 37 years in prison, he proclaimed, "I have no bitterness at all, because I don't have room in my life for bitterness." Bitterness. If you keep hatred and bitterness in your heart, it just steals your joy from everything else. I can't get back the decades that I lost, but I'm going to try to rebuild my life with my family, Duboise said upon his exoneration. It won't be easy. He had admitted to being a bit nervous, but also excited about being free for the first time since 1983. He is aware the road ahead will be a transition and admitted to never having used an iPhone or computer and never stepped foot in a Walmart or a Home Depot, but I am just so grateful that my voice was heard and the truth is out there. Robert Duboise filed a lawsuit against Souviron and several of the former Tampa police officials responsible for his arrest and conviction. 2 years later, a grand jury returned an indictment against Amos Robinson and Abron Scott for the murder of Grams. Both men are serving life in prison for a 1983 Pinellas County murder. They are also charged with the slaying of Linda Lanson, who disappeared from her Tampa apartment in July 1983. Both prosecutions remain pending. Since his exoneration 3 years ago, Duboise has worked as a truck driver and a maintenance worker for a country club. He made repeated trips to Tallahassee in recent weeks to appear before committees and meet lawmakers. He had help from Delegal Aubuchon Consulting, a public policy firm, which represented him on a pro bono basis. On 29 April 2023, Florida lawmakers okayed $1.85 million for Tampa man's wrongful conviction. The legislature approved bills to compensate Robert Duboise, who spent 37 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. The state's elected representatives made a gesture to tell him they were sorry. It was an apology that came with the promise of $1.85 million, representing $50,000 for each of the 37 years that Duboise spent wrongfully incarcerated for a murder he did not commit. From a House spectator gallery, Duboise stood and smiled as state representatives gave him a standing ovation Friday after the vote. "I'm just really thankful it's done," Duboise said afterward. "I met a lot of good people, and I'm thankful to them for being so supportive." He spent all day watching lawmakers debate and vote on other legislation, waiting more than 8 hours for them to consider his case. Representative Wyman Duggan, R. Jacksonville, one of the House bill's sponsors, said he was told that Duboise has learned to be patient. "We have a part to play and this is it," Duggan told House members. "We can apologize and we can do, in a small way, something to make him whole. The money that's given in no way makes up for the years, months, days, minutes, and moments lost," said Kimberly Daniels, D. Jacksonville, one of the bill's sponsors. "But it is my prayer that for the 37 years that Mr. Duboise experienced, I pray that this will at least give him some relief. And when the money hits his account, I pray that he will flourish." Duboise said he hopes to use the money to open a business, buy a home and help his family.